The alien students sat quietly in their classroom, waiting for the teacher to give them their next assignment. They came from many different planets, each with its own way of life. Some were tall with green skin, others were small and covered in fur. But they all shared the same goal: to learn about the many worlds in the galaxy. Earth, however, was different. It was known to all as a Deathworld, a place too dangerous for most creatures to survive. Yet the students had never truly understood why. Today, their teacher, Professor Zyler, stood at the front of the class, a tall being with shining blue skin and glowing eyes. He had taught them about many worlds, planets full of beauty, peace, and calm. But Earth, the planet they had heard so many rumors about, remained a mystery. To most species, Earth was a place of fear, but the professor was determined to help them understand. "Today's assignment is special," Professor Zyler said, his voice calm yet serious. "You are to travel to Earth and discover why it is known as a death world. You will observe the creatures, the environment, and the dangers that make this planet so dangerous. Return with your answers." The students looked at each other, their eyes filled with confusion and excitement. A death world. That sounded extreme. They had heard the stories, the deadly creatures, the harsh weather, the strange plants, but they didn't truly believe them. To them, Earth seemed like just another planet. After all, what made it so different from their own worlds? One of the students, a tall alien with 4 arms named Drac, raised his hand. "Professor, are you sure this is necessary? It sounds like a myth. Our home planets are far more dangerous than Earth." Professor Zyler smiled. "You may think that, Drac, but I assure you, Earth has proven to be one of the most dangerous places in the galaxy. You'll soon see for yourselves." The students murmured to each other, some still unsure, others curious. They had learned about Earth in their lessons, but hearing about it in stories and seeing it with their own eyes were two very different things. They were about to leave the safety of their classroom and journey to a world unlike any other. The classroom doors slid open, and the students followed their professor to a large, shiny spaceship. It was sleek and fast, built to travel across vast distances in space. As they boarded the ship, the students were filled with excitement. They had traveled to many planets before, but Earth was different. It was the one planet no one understood fully. As the ship lifted off from the ground and soared into the stars, the students looked out of the windows, eager to begin their adventure. They had no idea what awaited them. They thought Earth would be just another planet, maybe a little different, maybe a little strange. But the idea that it was a death world seemed silly. They would soon find out if those stories were true. In the distance, the blue and green ball that was Earth grew larger, shining brightly in the blackness of space. The students felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, ready to uncover the secrets of the world that had earned such a terrifying reputation. Little did they know, their adventure on Earth would change everything they thought they knew about survival. The spaceship touched down with a soft thud on the green, grassy land. The students looked out of the large windows, staring at the new world they had just landed on. Earth was unlike any place they had ever seen. It was covered in blue oceans, green forests, and vast deserts. The air was thick and smelled strange, fresh yet full of unknown scents. The ground beneath them felt solid, but there was something unsettling about it. The students stood up and followed Professor Zyler to the exit of the ship. As the door slid open, a wave of cool, damp air rushed inside. The students took their first steps onto Earth, each feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. They had been told Earth was a death world, but they still couldn't fully understand what that meant. Drac, the 4-armed alien, stepped carefully onto the grass, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "It's just grass and trees," he said, his voice full of doubt. "What's so dangerous about this place?" Professor Zyler gave him a knowing look. "Earth is more than just what you see. Keep your eyes open." The students began to walk through the dense forest, the sound of leaves crunching under their feet. The trees were tall and thick, with vines hanging from their branches. Birds chirped high above, and insects buzzed around. Everything seemed peaceful, almost calming. But then, a loud rustling sound echoed through the forest. The students froze, their eyes wide. Something large was moving through the bushes, getting closer. Drac took a step back. "What is that?" he whispered. Suddenly, a massive creature emerged from the trees. A large, furry animal with sharp teeth and claws. Its eyes glowed with hunger, and it growled at the students, showing its teeth. The alien students stood frozen in place, unsure of what to do. The creature was bigger than anything they had ever seen. It looked dangerous, and its growls sent a chill down their spines. Professor Xyler quickly stepped forward, his calm voice cutting through the panic. "Stay still," he instructed. "Do not make any sudden movements." The creature sniffed the air, its eyes scanning the group. It seemed to lose interest for a moment. But then, with a low growl, it turned and began to walk away. The students let out a collective sigh of relief, but they were shaken. "That thing was huge," Drac said, his voice trembling. "I thought we were done for." "It's a predator," Professor Xyler explained. "On Earth, creatures like that are common. This planet is filled with life that fights for survival. Always be alert." The students were silent for a moment. They had never encountered a creature like that before. The animals on their home planets were nothing like Earth's wild beasts. They had always lived in safe environments, where danger was rare. But Earth was different. Here, everything seemed dangerous, from the animals to the environment. "We should move," Professor Xyler said. "We are far from the ship. Keep your senses sharp. There's much more to see, and it's not all as friendly as what we've seen so far." With that, the group moved deeper into the forest, their footsteps careful and quiet. They began to understand what their professor meant. Earth was not a peaceful world. It was a world where danger lurked around every corner. Even the most peaceful-looking places could hide deadly surprises. The students felt their hearts beat faster as they realized just how dangerous this Deathworld could be. Little did they know, the true tests of Earth's dangers were only just beginning. The alien students walked deeper into the forest, their eyes wide with caution. Every step seemed to make the world feel more dangerous. The peaceful sounds of the birds and wind were now mixed with strange, eerie noises. They were beginning to realize that Earth's creatures weren't like the animals they knew from their own planets. As they moved forward, Drac, the four-armed student, reached out to touch a large tree. "This doesn't seem so bad," he said, though his voice was uncertain. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet shook. The trees trembled as a loud crash echoed through the forest. The students stopped in their tracks, looking around nervously. A loud roar rang out from behind them. "Do you hear that?" Drac asked, his eyes wide. "What is it?" Before anyone could answer, a massive shape emerged from the trees. It was a giant bear-like creature, its fur dark and matted. Its eyes gleamed with hunger, and its huge claws scraped the ground as it moved closer. The creature sniffed the air, its eyes locked on the students. Professor Xyler quickly motioned for the students to remain calm. "Stay still. Don't run." The creature growled, its powerful jaws snapping. The students could feel the danger in the air. Their hearts raced as the giant animal moved closer. Its massive paws hit the ground with heavy thuds. They had never seen an animal like this before, and it was clear that it was no ordinary creature. Drac was trembling. "Are we supposed to fight it? It's huge." "No," Professor Xyler replied, his voice steady. "We cannot fight this creature. We must avoid it." The creature roared again, showing its sharp teeth. The students held their breath, afraid that the animal would attack. But then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature turned and walked back into the trees, disappearing as quickly as it had come. The students let out a collective sigh of relief, but their nerves were still on edge. "Earth is full of creatures like that," Professor Xyler explained, his tone serious. "Many of them are predators, and they are strong. On Earth, Everything has to fight for survival. There are no safe places. The students looked at each other, their faces pale. They had never felt so vulnerable. They had always lived on planets where danger was far away, controlled and manageable. But here on Earth, it was different. The creatures were unpredictable, and the world was wild. As they continued walking, they saw more strange animals. Some were small, like fast-moving lizards with glowing eyes, while others were large, like herd animals with massive horns. Some creatures seemed to be watching them from a distance, their eyes gleaming with curiosity or caution. One of the students, a small alien with blue scales named Lyra, pointed ahead. "Look," she said. In the distance, a large herd of animals was moving through the trees. They had thick, strong legs and large antlers on their heads. These creatures seemed peaceful, but the students knew better than to get too close. "They aren't the biggest danger here," Professor Xylor said quietly. "The real dangers on Earth come from those that blend into the environment, creatures that hide until it's too late." As the students walked on, they began to understand. Earth was a place where every living creature had to be strong, fast, and smart to survive. From the giant predators to the small, hidden threats, danger was always close by. The students now realized that they were not just visitors on Earth. They were part of a world that was fighting to stay alive every moment. And they still hadn't seen the worst of it. The students continued their journey through Earth's forests, still shaken by the giant creatures they had encountered. As they walked, the air seemed to grow heavier, and the sky above started to change. Dark clouds began to gather quickly, blocking out the sun. A cold wind blew, making the students shiver despite their thick outer clothing. "Is it always this cold here?" Drac asked, pulling his arms tighter around himself. "No," Professor Xylor replied, his voice calm but serious. "This is just the beginning. On Earth, the weather can change quickly, and when it does, it's dangerous." Before Drac could ask more, the first loud crash of thunder echoed across the sky. The students looked up in shock. A flash of bright lightning lit up the sky, followed by another rumble of thunder. The wind began to pick up, and soon large drops of rain began to fall. At first, it was just a light drizzle, but within moments, the rain turned into a heavy downpour. "This is nothing," Lyra, the small blue-scaled alien, said nervously. "We've seen storms on our home planets before. They are nothing like this." But as the rain came down harder, the students realized how wrong Lyra was. The wind howled, bending the trees, and the rain was so thick it was hard to see. They could barely hear anything over the roar of the storm. It was as if the very planet itself was angry. "This is just the beginning," Professor Xylor said again. "On Earth, storms like this can cause floods and landslides. We need to find shelter now." The students quickly looked around, trying to find cover. But the forest didn't seem to have anywhere safe to hide. The wind was so strong it pushed them back, and the rain stung their faces like needles. They struggled to move, the wet ground making their steps slippery. Suddenly, there was a loud crack, followed by the sound of something crashing to the ground. A massive tree nearby had been struck by lightning and had fallen, blocking their path. "We need to hurry," Professor Xylor urged. "Stay close to me." With no time to waste, they ran, following the professor through the storm. The wind pushed them forward, making it hard to keep their balance. The heavy rain soaked them to the bone, and the thunder echoed so loudly that it made their ears ring. The students reached a small cave, just in time to escape the storm's fury. Inside, they huddled together, shivering from the cold and drenched from the rain. They were exhausted, their hearts still racing from the terrifying storm. "What just happened?" Drac asked, his voice shaking. "How can Earth's weather change so fast?" Professor Xylor sat down, catching his breath. "On Earth, the weather can be unpredictable and dangerous. These storms are just a small part of what makes this planet so deadly. Creatures can survive, but the weather doesn't care. If we hadn't found shelter, The storm could have easily wiped us out. Lyra looked outside the cave, her eyes wide with fear. I've never seen anything like this. It's like the planet is alive, and it's angry. Professor Xylor nodded. Earth is a place where everything fights to survive. Plants, animals, and even the weather. Nature here is unpredictable, and it can be deadly if you're not careful. The students sat quietly, listening to the storm rage outside. They had faced dangerous creatures before, but this was different. The weather on Earth was another enemy, and it was just as powerful as the wild beasts they had encountered. They began to understand just how harsh and unforgiving Earth could be. As the storm raged on, they realized that Earth was not a place for the weak. It was a place where only the strong, the smart, and the prepared could survive. The storm finally passed, leaving behind a quiet, damp world. The students stayed in the cave for a while, waiting for the weather to calm down. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick and heavy, filled with the scent of wet earth. As they slowly stepped outside, they could feel the planet's harshness everywhere. Professor, Drax said, looking around, how does Earth survive all of this? The animals, the plants, everything seems to be fighting for survival. Professor Xylor nodded, his eyes looking out into the forest. That is Earth's story, he said. Everything here fights to stay alive. Unlike many other planets, Earth's life forms have evolved to handle the harshest conditions. The creatures, the plants, and even the weather. It's all part of a never-ending battle. The students were quiet, trying to understand what their professor meant. On their home planets, life was more peaceful. The weather was stable, and the creatures lived in harmony. But on Earth, the rules seemed to be different. Everything here was trying to survive, and that meant danger was everywhere. As they walked further into the forest, they noticed the plants were unlike any they had ever seen. Some were huge, with thick, strong leaves that seemed to stretch out and grab at the air. Others were covered in sharp thorns, as if ready to fight off anything that came too close. These plants, Lyra said, her voice full of wonder, they're built to protect themselves. It's like they know they need to fight for survival. That's right, Professor Xylor replied. On Earth, plants have developed defenses to protect themselves from being eaten or destroyed. Some use thorns, others release poisonous chemicals into the air. Everything here is built to fight for its life. As they moved deeper into the forest, the students noticed more strange creatures, some with thick, tough skin, others with sharp teeth or claws. It was clear that everything on Earth had adapted in its own way to survive. The creatures weren't just living. They were fighting, struggling to stay alive. Drac looked at a large insect that was crawling on a tree. Even the insects are dangerous here, he said, his eyes wide. Professor Xylor smiled slightly. Yes, even the smallest creatures on Earth can be deadly. The insects here are fierce, and many have developed ways to defend themselves or attack their prey. It's all part of the survival story of this planet. The students were starting to realize the truth. Earth wasn't just a planet. It was a battleground. Every living thing, from the largest predators to the smallest plants, had to fight to survive. The creatures weren't just existing. They were adapting, learning, and becoming stronger to face the harsh conditions of their world. What makes Earth so different from other planets? Lyra asked. Why is it that everything here is so extreme? Professor Xylor paused for a moment, thinking. Earth is unique because it is full of contrasts. It has dangerous creatures, but it also has peaceful ones. It has terrible storms, but also moments of calm. This balance between danger and peace is what has shaped Earth's survival story. It's a planet where nothing is easy, but everything is possible if you fight hard enough. The students stood in silence, looking at the world around them. They had come to Earth to understand its reputation as a death world, but now they saw it in a new light. It wasn't just dangerous, it was a place where survival meant everything. They realized they had only just begun to understand Earth's true nature. There was so much more to learn, but one thing was certain: survival on Earth would not be easy. The students had been walking for hours, trying to understand Earth's wild, unpredictable nature. They had seen strange creatures, felt the force of deadly storms, and witnessed the planet's struggle for survival. But Professor Zeiler knew there was one more lesson the students needed to learn. Earth's toughest survivors weren't just plants or animals. They were the stories of those who had lived through it all and made it to the other side. "Professor," Drac said, his voice low, "we've seen so much already, but how do the creatures here survive? How do they make it through all the dangers?" Professor Zeiler stopped walking and looked at his students. Survival on Earth is not just about strength. It's about adaptation. Earth's creatures, from the smallest insects to the largest animals, have learned to change, evolve, and fight for survival in ways you've never seen before. The students listened carefully, eager to hear more. "There are creatures here," Professor Zeiler continued, "that seem almost invincible. Take the mighty cockroach, for example. This tiny insect has been alive for millions of years. It can survive without food for weeks, withstand poison, and even live through nuclear radiation. Its secret is simple: the cockroach adapts. It has learned how to survive in almost any environment, and nothing can stop it." Lyra, the small blue-scaled alien, looked amazed. "That sounds incredible, but what about bigger creatures?" Professor Zeiler smiled. "Let's talk about one of the biggest survivors on Earth, the African elephant. Despite their size, elephants have survived for centuries in the harshest conditions. They travel in herds, using teamwork to protect the young and the sick. When food is scarce, they can use their powerful trunks to dig for water. They are strong, wise, and have learned how to survive in the toughest environments." Drac was fascinated. "But what about the predators? How do they survive?" "Good question," Professor Zeiler said. "Predators are built for survival in their own way. Take the tiger, for instance. Its sharp claws, powerful muscles, and silent movements allow it to stalk its prey without being seen. But the tiger also knows when to strike. It waits for the perfect moment, using patience and skill to catch its food. It's not just strength. It's strategy that makes the tiger such a successful predator." The students walked in silence, thinking about the creatures Professor Zeiler had mentioned. Earth's survivors were not only strong, but they had learned to adapt to the world around them, using their intelligence and skills to stay alive. "The secret to surviving on Earth," Professor Zeiler said, "is to never stop learning, never stop adapting. Every creature here faces challenges, but it is those that can change and evolve that last the longest." As they walked on, the students began to see Earth in a new light. They realized that survival wasn't just about being the strongest. It was about learning to adapt, to change with the world around you. The animals and plants of Earth had faced many dangers, yet they had found ways to survive. Earth wasn't just a death world. It was a place where life, in all its forms, had learned to fight, adapt, and survive. The students could feel the power of that lesson deep inside them. If they wanted to survive on Earth, they would have to do the same. The students were tired. They had walked for hours, learning about the dangers and the strange creatures that lived on Earth. Every step they took seemed to bring them closer to understanding just how harsh and deadly the planet could be. But nothing had prepared them for what was about to come next. Professor Zeiler led the group to a clearing in the forest. The sun was starting to set, casting an orange glow across the sky. The students were eager to sit down and rest, but the professor had something important to tell them. "Sit down, everyone," he said. "It's time to reveal the final lesson of Earth, the truth about why this planet is called a death world." The students sat on the ground, their eyes filled with curiosity. They had seen Earth's dangers up close, but they were still eager to learn more. Professor Zeiler paused for a moment, looking at each of them. "The truth is that Earth's life forms didn't just survive the dangers of this world. They caused them. You see, many of the creatures on Earth, including humans, have been the cause of much of the destruction and danger that you've witnessed. The students blinked, not understanding. What do you mean, Professor? Drac asked. Professor Xylor sighed. Humans, the dominant species on Earth, are not just survivors. They are also the reason why Earth is so dangerous. Over time, humans have shaped the planet, changing ecosystems and creating new challenges for life here. Lyra looked confused. How could humans cause danger? Aren't they just like any other creature? Not quite, Professor Xylor replied. Humans have the ability to create, to build, and to destroy. They have changed their environment in ways that no other species on Earth has. They built cities, cut down forests, polluted the air, and created weapons that can wipe out entire populations. Earth's wildlife, plants, and ecosystems didn't just evolve to survive the harsh conditions of nature. They also had to adapt to the changes humans brought. The students were silent, shocked by this new information. They had heard of humans before, but they never knew the full story of how they had shaped their planet. So, humans caused the danger? Drac asked, his voice low. But weren't they just trying to survive like everyone else? Professor Xylor nodded. Yes, humans were trying to survive. But in their quest to thrive, they also brought about great destruction. Their ability to innovate and create has allowed them to conquer and control their world. However, that same power has led to environmental collapse, wars, and a loss of natural balance. The students looked around, seeing the world in a new light. They had seen Earth's wildlife, its storms, and its dangerous creatures. But now they understood that humans had played a huge role in the planet's struggle to survive. Humans are powerful, Professor Xylor said, but their strength comes with a cost. They are both the creators and the destroyers of this world. They have learned to adapt and survive, but they are also responsible for the challenges that other creatures face. The students sat quietly, the weight of the professor's words sinking in. They realized that Earth was not just a world of natural dangers, but a place where intelligent beings had shaped their own survival, and in doing so, had changed the planet forever. The sun was setting, and the forest grew quieter. The students had learned so much in the past days, but Professor Xylor knew there was still one final lesson to teach them. He had shown them the dangers of Earth, how the planet itself was a place of survival, and how humans had both created and faced those dangers. But there was one last test. Everyone, gather around, Professor Xylor called, his voice serious. Now that you know about Earth's dangers and its survival story, there's one last thing you must understand. You will face a final challenge. It will test everything you've learned so far. The students stood up, their faces filled with a mix of curiosity and fear. They had no idea what the professor meant, but they trusted him. They had been through a lot already, and they were ready for whatever came next. Your final challenge is simple, Professor Xylor continued. You must survive the night in this forest. Alone. The students gasped. Alone? Lyra asked, her voice shaking. You want us to survive here, in this deadly forest, by ourselves? Yes, Professor Xylor said firmly. You have learned the basics of survival. How to avoid danger, how to adapt, how to work as a team. Now you must prove that you can rely on what you've learned. You will be tested on your ability to survive alone in the wild. The students exchanged nervous glances. They had seen the dangers of the forest, wild creatures, unpredictable weather, and the harsh conditions, but they also knew that this was their chance to prove themselves. They had come this far, and now they had to face Earth's toughest challenge. You will not have any special tools or technology, the professor explained. Only your wits, your instincts, and the knowledge you've gained. Remember what I taught you about Earth's survivors. The key is to adapt, to think on your feet, and to survive. Drac swallowed hard but nodded. We understand. Good, Professor Xylor said. You have until sunrise. Find shelter, food, and water. Stay safe, and remember, Earth is a place of danger, but also a place of opportunity for those who are smart enough to survive. I will be nearby, but I will not help you. This is your test." With that, Professor Xylor turned and walked off, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. The students stood for a moment, unsure of what to do. They had no choice but to move forward. Slowly, they spread out, each of them determined to face the challenge head-on. Lyra found a small tree with thick leaves, perfect for shelter. Drac found a stream and filled his water container. The forest was full of surprises. Some were dangerous, but others offered solutions. The students realized that surviving wasn't about brute strength. It was about using their minds and the lessons they had learned. As night fell, the forest became darker, and the sounds of creatures filled the air. The students had to stay calm, listening carefully for danger. They knew that everything they had learned up until now was about to be put to the test. The night was long, filled with challenges and surprises. But it was also a moment of growth. The students learned to trust their instincts, to rely on their skills, and to adapt to whatever came their way. The final challenge had begun, and they were ready to face it. The night had been long and filled with challenges. Every student had faced their own fears and doubts, but by the time the first light of dawn broke through the trees, they had survived. The forest, which had seemed so dangerous and unpredictable, now felt different. The students had learned how to listen to the sounds of nature, how to find shelter, and how to stay calm in the face of danger. One by one, they returned to the clearing where Professor Xylor had left them the night before. Lyra was the first to arrive, her clothes dirty and her hair tangled, but her eyes sparkled with pride. Drac followed closely behind, looking tired but satisfied. The others came in soon after, each with their own story of how they survived the night. Some had struggled, others had excelled, but all had made it. Professor Xylor was already waiting for them, his calm face showing no sign of worry. He had known they could do it. "Well done," he said, his voice steady. "You have all passed the final challenge. You survived the night in the forest of Earth. You learned the lessons of this planet, how to adapt, how to think, and most importantly, how to respect it." The students stood in silence, feeling the weight of his words. They had come to Earth thinking of it as a dangerous, wild planet. They had learned that it was all those things, but they also learned that survival wasn't just about strength. It was about respect. Respect for the planet, for its creatures, and for the balance that kept everything alive. Professor Xylor continued, "Earth is a place of extremes, where life can be both beautiful and deadly. But it is also a place where life finds a way to survive. Now you understand why this planet is called a Deathworld. It is not just about danger. It is about the will to survive, the strength to adapt, and the ability to respect the world around you." Lyra nodded, a smile slowly forming on her face. "I never thought I could survive something like this. But now, I feel like I understand Earth in a way I never did before." Drac agreed, his voice quiet but full of respect. "I thought the dangers of this planet were too much to handle. But I see now that Earth isn't just about surviving. It's about understanding the world and working with it." The professor smiled at them. "You are right. You have learned what many others never will. Survival is not just about fighting or being the strongest. It's about knowing your place in the world and respecting the forces around you. Now you carry that knowledge with you." The students stood a little taller, their minds full of new understanding. They had come to Earth as strangers, unsure of how they would handle the dangers of such a wild world. But now they were leaving with something far more valuable than just survival skills. They were leaving with respect for the planet, its creatures, and the lessons they had learned. As they prepared to leave the forest, they looked back one last time. The trees, the animals, the river, it all seemed different now. They saw Earth not just as a dangerous place, but as a world that had taught them to grow, adapt, and survive. With respect in their hearts, they returned home, ready to share the stories of their journey and the lessons they would never forget.